Joe Biden keeps mixing up Iraq and Ukraine, and Donald Trump just blatantly tells you that they were gonna nick Venezuelan oil. Is this the real reason they want him out of the way? Hello there, you 6.4 million awakening wonders. Thanks for joining me on this voyage through truth and freedom. What an age it is to be alive when the best chance you get of getting the truth out of the President of the United States is a Freudian slip. And that's why we simply have to invade Iraq. I mean, Ukraine. Oh, I don't remember the name of all these countries. They've got gas, they've got oil. It's so complicated. Burisma, Hunter! What a complicated time. Turn on the notification bell and subscribe right now. Remember, we make this content every single day, as well as our live stream show, which there's a link to in the description. You can join us there. Great guests, fun times every single day of the week. Perhaps the reason we find it hard to trust politicians is because George Bush accidentally says Iraq instead of Ukraine. Perhaps because in their minds, they know that there's a connection, that there are connotations, comparisons, similarities between the conflict in Iraq, which we were told was a humanitarian war, which ultimately proved to be a resource war that made the situation, many would argue, worse than it was before we got militarily involved. And this current conflict between Ukraine and Russia, which many contest is in fact a proxy war between the USA and Russia, is also undergirded in some ways by economic and resource motivations that aren't being made explicitly plain because it would undermine the entire process of the war. But if you've got to hold all that information in your quaking, senile mind, you might inadvertently once in a while go, Ukraine, and get all baffled and confused. Contrast that with Donald Trump, who'll plainly just say, yeah, we were going to go to Venezuela, but they've got oil there. We were going to take that oil. Even though I think that's wrong, bad, criminal, in fact, or at least, I don't know, maybe that's just the way geopolitics is. I kind of think, well, this guy's telling you how it is. Like Chappelle said in his famous bit of stand-up, Donald Trump was the guy that came out of the White House and goes, you know all that stuff you think people are doing in there? They are doing that in there.
I know the system is rigged because I use it. I said, God damn.
That makes Donald Trump immune to attacks like, oh, he's got these classified documents. They're all doing stuff like that. They're all doing stuff like that. You think that what Pelosi's telling her husband at night ain't complicated when it comes to his stock trading? You think that these current wars are entirely legitimate and people ain't profiting? You think it's good that generals that have got ties to Raytheon and Lockheed Martin are cropping up on mainstream news companies that are ultimately owned by other weapons contract companies or advocating for war? Once you have someone like Trump, he operates as a berserker, a catalyst, just disrupting everything. And whether or not he's morally or ethically better than any of these other figures is a difficult argument to have because they're all bloody corrupt anyway. On the subject of Freudian slips, and in particular Joe Biden's Freudian slip, a Freudian slip is where you inadvertently say something that you're trying to repress, but some impulse or reflex makes you accidentally say it. In our country, the UK, we have a very unpopular and not that likable politician called Jeremy Hunt, and look what mainstream media figures keep accidentally calling him.
We're going to be talking to Jeremy Hunt, the Culture Secretary, about
Jeremy Hunt.
Mr. Hunt had to.
Jeremy Hunt.
The Health Secretary Jeremy Hunt says he.
Secretary Jeremy Hunt, according to
Jeremy the Hunt.
Friend of the show, Aaron Mate, posted this tweet. A good example of why the national security state hates Trump. They share his policies, they just don't like his honesty. Let me know in the comments if you think it's just as simple as that. Trump does the stuff they all do, he just tells you.
How about we're buying oil from Venezuela? When I left, Venezuela was ready to collapse. We would have taken it over. We would have gotten all that oil. It would have been right next door. But now we're buying oil from Venezuela, so we're making a dictator very rich. Can you believe this? Nobody can believe it.
That's just a funny way to say, we're taking it just right next door. To our convenience, we're making him rich. Can you believe it? No one can believe it. Contrast that with the kind of political rhetoric around the current conflict in Ukraine, where Mitch McConnell will just announce, this is cold, hard business. We have to destroy Russia as a matter of business. Or Hillary Clinton saying American corporations have to exploit the opportunity of Iraq. At the time, they were telling you, we've got to do something about Iraq. Saddam Hussein's a monster. He's got weapons of mass destruction. Saddam Hussein probably is a monster. I'm not here to advocate for Saddam Hussein. That's not my bloody job. What I'm saying is, in the land of the blind, the one-eyed man is king.
Their oil is garbage. It's horrible. The worst you can get. Tar. It's like tar.
Funny as well that he's sort of got qualitative judgment on oil.
And to refine it, you need special plans.
Getting really into the oil industry, he trusts his instincts to just talk. As president, Trump made it clear that Washington seeks to control the natural resources of foreign countries. That's something that you and I believe, isn't it? Like, oh, is it important that there's all this natural gas in Ukraine and that BlackRock have done a deal with Zelensky to rebuild it? Is that not significant, and that they want to economically cripple Russia so that it can't compete on the geopolitical stage? And isn't there an eventual plan to start a war with China over Taiwan and the semiconductors? These are all just things now that all of us are somewhat familiar with, miraculously. I mean, I used to be in Sarah Marshall, and I know all this stuff. In a January 2020 interview on Fox News, Trump boasted that he was militarily occupying Syria's crude-rich regions in order to take the oil. So there you go. On one hand, you have Donald Trump, a complex figure who in the past has said things that I definitely disagree with. And politically, I don't believe to be the solution, because I believe in decentralization and redistribution of power, not necessarily resources, but certainly power. On the other hand, you have a career politician like Joe Biden.
To what extent has Vladimir Putin been weakened by recent events? It's hard to tell, but he's clearly losing the war in Iraq. He's losing the war at home. And he has become a bit of a pariah around the world.
He condemned Putin as a pariah, like he did the Saudi Arabian government when campaigning for the presidency. So expect a fist bump with Putin anytime soon, once those oil deals are back on track. What's interesting about this is that he's easily and unthinkingly equating Ukraine and Iraq, possibly because Ukraine and Iraq are similar situations. We were told in Iraq it was a humanitarian war. We were told there were weapons of mass destruction. It turned out it was an economic resource war that subsequently the then Republican Party hawks like Wolfowitz and Rumsfeld and Cheney and all those guys benefited from secondary affiliations with financial and corporate interests. Now Ukraine, we're being told, this is a humanitarian war. Russia has encroached on their territories. NATO's actions up to that and the coup in 2014 are nothing to do with it, even though there are very credible experts. You can see them on our show. The interviews are up in full. Say, hold on a minute, this is a more complex story. So maybe Biden, who is obviously in office because he's a career politician, he's been around throughout these various expeditions, somehow in his mind sees an equivalency between Iraq and Ukraine. What do you think? Let me know in the comments.
Russian elections are rigged. Political opponents are imprisoned or otherwise eliminated from participating in the electoral process.
He's talking about Russia there. Rigged elections, bringing down opponents. He's talking about Russia. What did you think? Where do you think that there are rigged elections?
The result is an absence of checks and balances in Russia and the decision of one man to launch a wholly unjustified and brutal invasion of Iraq.
That's so amazing, because he is that man. He is the man that launched a wholly unjustified and brutal invasion of Iraq. Wait a minute, who was it that did that? Oh, it was me. It's extraordinary, isn't it? Because ultimately we're dealing with truth, integrity, personal authority and authenticity. Do any of us believe now that the state can be relied on to tell us the truth, that the mainstream media can be relied on to report that truth accurately? Do any of us believe that there is an economic component to the current conflict between Ukraine and Russia? Do any of us believe that if there was no economic upside, they would continue to do it just in order to protect the Ukrainian people? If you do believe that, then the only question I would offer you is, what about all of the other brutal events around the world? Why this one?
I mean, of Ukraine.
Oh, that's almost like you can't even joke your way out of that, can you? There's no joke for that. Sorry, I got mixed up there because it was an immoral, unjust criminal war and I should be in prison because of that. Oof, silly me.
All right. Anyway. 75.
I'm 75. It was a long time ago. I'm old. I make mistakes, like that mistake when 1 million children were killed in a war. This is by Caitlin Johnston. You should follow her on Substack. President Biden accidentally referred to Putin's war in Iraq when answering questions from the press a year after former President George W. Bush made the same gaffe. Both men played crucial roles in the push to invade Iraq. During the 2020 presidential race, Current Affairs' Nathan J. Robinson wrote the following about Biden's pivotal role in manufacturing support for the Iraq invasion. So Biden was integrally involved in that war too. Do you see what I mean? People are groomed, primed, prepared, prepped, ready for government. Why do you think they didn't want Bernie? I know loads of you guys think, oh, Bernie, I hate Bernie. But the Democrat Party establishment really cared that it was not Bernie. It had to be Biden. The same way as they really wanted Clinton, not Bernie. They've got a view. How do you think they feel about RFK? Do you think they go, oh, hang on a minute, RFK seems popular. Well, let's just push this guy through. He's someone that might beat DeSantis or Trump. Of course they wouldn't. They'd rather lose than have RFK as their leader. In 2003, Biden was a senator bullish about the push to war in Iraq, who helped sell the Bush administration's pitch to the American public, who voted for and helped advance the Bush agenda. Which one do you want to vote for? Is it the warmongering party that wears red stuff or wears blue stuff? Oh, I love democracy. He was the war's most crucial Senate supporter. Oh my God, he was distinguishing himself even back then by advocating for wars that turned out to be unjust and criminal and based on lies. Biden repeated the myth that Saddam Hussein had weapons of mass destruction, saying that these weapons must be dislodged from Saddam Hussein or Saddam Hussein must be dislodged from power. The resulting war was one of the most deadly catastrophes in the history of US foreign policy. The Iraqi death toll was in the hundreds of thousands or possibly even the millions, and 4,500 American troops died. Hey, I was looking at your record. Great work. Do you want to be in charge of another conflict? Oh, what? Hello, Hunter? Iraq, Ukraine. Ah! That Biden's decomposing brain would find the word Iraq when reaching for the word which means nation that has been illegally invaded by an evil government is positively Freudian. I defy you to find me anything that is more quintessentially representative of the state of the US empire than these two clips. Two decaying empire managers fumbling around in their skulls for the name of nation that's been invaded by murderous thugs and coming up with the name of the nation they themselves invaded. It's truly a thing of beauty. It's absolutely ridiculous that they're trying to charge Putin with war crimes while these two mass murderers are walking free. As American law professor Dale Carpenter has said, if citizens cannot trust that laws will be enforced in an even-handed and honest fashion, they cannot be said to live under the rule of law. Instead, they live under the rule of men corrupted by the law. This is all the more true of laws which would exist between nations, because we basically know that all politicians have access to classified documents, that nepotism, where they give advantages to their children and friends and families, where there's cronyism, where they do deals. When you find out that Donald Trump has a box of secrets, it's like, what? A box of secrets? Oh no! I thought that the country was being run by really great war criminals that accidentally say Iraq instead of Ukraine, because somewhere in the still flickering embers of what remains in their souls, they know what truth and decency is, and they know that what's happening now is very similar to what was happening then. Any law that can't be applied to all people isn't a law at all. It's just an instrument of power. That's what the Magna Carta was supposed to mean, that the king couldn't just set up laws and then do what he wanted with it, that the king himself would be subject to those laws. The laws were a separate entity. The whole Nixon case, I'm saying that when the president does it, it's not a crime.
Well, when the president does it, that means that it is not illegal.
We all know that. We all suspect that. So when Trump just breezily says, we'll nick Venezuela's oil, bad though that is if you're a Venezuelan person, we all know that that's how politics works. How can they still be baffled by the ascendancy and attractiveness of Trump? They can't be, can they? They must know. Do you know what the problem is? Is this guy can just admit to stuff that we're trying to conceal. It's not whataboutism to say it's absurd to charge Putin with war crimes without charging men like Bush and Biden. It's a completely devastating argument against the claim being made. If the law doesn't apply to everyone, then it's not the law, it's just corruption. It's a tool of the powerful. Just in the interest of showing you our receipts, here's Mitch McConnell revealing to you in public the real reason for the conflict with Russia.
President Zelensky is an inspiring leader, but the most basic reasons for continuing to help Ukraine degrade and defeat the Russian invaders are cold, hard, practical American interests.
Boo, boo. He's a Republican, right? Oh, I hate those Republicans, bloody warmongers. Let's get a Democrat, like Hillary Clinton. No one's more Democrat than her.
And so it's time for the United States to start thinking of Iraq as a business opportunity.
Oh, but their children? Are you comfortable with the dead children as a business opportunity? JP Morgan was selected by the US government to run a key import-export bank in Iraq, and in 2013 announced plans to expand its operation in the country. ExxonMobil signed a deal to redevelop Iraqi oil fields. JP Morgan has collectively paid the Clintons and the Clinton Foundation at least $450,000 for speeches, and ExxonMobil has donated over $1 million to the family's foundation. I see. I'm beginning to think I understand how this really works. works. So you have a politician like Trump who will blatantly tell you, we use those tax loopholes, we're going to take Venezuela's oil. And you maybe think, oh, this guy's vulgar. But when you see the opposition, when you see the institutional corruption, when you see the fact that Biden was advocating for the war in Iraq when he's a Democrat, now he's advocating for war between Ukraine and Russia as the president, war is business. It's not about humanitarianism. It never has been. A figure like Trump is appealing because he's saying out loud what the rest of them work so hard to conceal. Government isn't for you, it's for big business. But that's just what I think. Why don't you let me know what you think in the comments? If you enjoyed this video, have a look at this. That's the stream we make every single day where we talk to fantastic guests about subjects like this. Or if you enjoyed this video, have a look at this one. It's fantastic too. Turn on the notification bell and subscribe right now. We make this content every single day and we want you to see it all. More important than any of that is that you please stay free.